Hi, it's Lerald. You saw the video title, you saw the thumbnail, so you know what's up. This is a video about how I both spent and profited 3 divines per map. I mostly do content about new player information, whether it's league start build guides or early league currency farming or like highly efficient, low cost farm strats that you can do in tier 16s on kind of a budget. Stuff like that. But sometimes you just want to set a giant pile of money on fire and see what happens, and that's what this video is all about. I spent, like I said, over 3 divines per map, slightly over like 3.05 or something, and then I farmed over 20 divines per hour doing it. I think it was actually more like 25 divines per hour once you factor in the roughly 400 to 500 tier 16 maps that I also farmed doing this strategy, but I didn't include that in any of my final calculations, so I wound up around 23 and change divines per hour, which is pretty good. Now, I think I could cut some costs and actually make this significantly more profitable, over 25 divines, but again, we're over 20 divines per hour here, and the point was really to push the costs as high as possible, kind of turn the costs to 11, and not really so much to be efficient or maximize profits, although obviously that was something I was hoping for as well, so I was just really happy that this worked out as well as it did. I am working on a cheapo follow-up version for people who don't want to break the bank or run tier 17s, and that'll be my next video, but let's go ahead and get into the high roller strategy. But first, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Alright, so for the strategy, it is a juiced tier 17 ambush farm strategy. We are specifically pushing for currency mods from tier 17 maps and juicing that in every way possible, including using the new Maven's Chisels. I forget the name, I'm looking at it right now. Maven's Chisel of Avarice. This will increase the amount of currency that you find in the maps instead of just doing the regular thing a chisel does where it gives you 20% more quantity of items. Instead, you are getting more currency as sort of a multiplicative effect that also interacts with the tier 17 map mod that gives you more currency. So with really, really good rolls on a tier 17 map, you can get over 300% more currency drops on some maps. I had some that were over 350% more currency before I zoned into the map, like over 500% more currency once I was in the map and had map mod effect interacting with all of the stacking mods that I had on the map, including the chisel. Now, as I said, I spent over 3 divines per map, but I more than doubled my money over the course of 25 maps. My initial plan had been to just farm 20 maps, but at the end of those 20 maps, I had spent 60 divines, right on, like 60 divines and 50 chaos or something, and I had made about 120, 121 divines worth of stuff in my dump tab, and I thought, yeah, that seems crazy. I should do another 5 maps as just kind of a sanity test, and I was having fun. You know, this is a fun strategy, so since it was fun, why not make another 15 divines and 5 maps? Just see if I'm sane. And that's exactly what happened. Maps 21 and 22 actually lost me a bit of money. I think I lost about a divine in each of those because this strategy can be somewhat RNG. And then on map 23, I profited at like 9.5 or 10 divines, and I ended up profiting right at 15 divines over the course of those final 5 maps. So pretty much 3 divines in, 6 divines out. That pretty much wound up being consistently like that over the course of the whole strategy. Although again, not every single map would be profitable. There were definitely times where I took a bit of a bath on some maps, and then I would make it up on map number 3 or 5 or 12 or whatever. So I feel pretty confident that while RNG does swing in one way or another at times, and this is absolutely not the most optimized version of the strategy, which I do think I will cover more later on, this definitely worked. It was successful. For a more normal tier 17 map strategy, I would look for more of a combined value of more currency and more scarabs, and I'll actually just show off a tier 17 map here, kind of to compare. You can see this is a map that has more maps, more currency, more scarabs, those different mods, and more scarabs is at 53%, more currency is at 109. So ideally what you're looking for is a combination of that more scarabs and more currency that adds up to around 120. Like, let's see if I can find one that has a little bit different numbers here. 53% more scarab, 70% more currency. This is kind of the low end. 120 is kind of the floor. If you're really trying to push more min-maxi, then maybe you would want to go for more like a combination of 130 or 140% as your floor. This map right here is an insanely juicy one. We're looking at over 230% combined, over like 240% more scarabs and currency. Amazing. But again, I was really only pushing for more currency, so this map right here would actually be kind of bad for the strategy I was going for. I was looking for at least 100% more currency on every map, so this one would be kind of the baseline, the minimum, and all the rest of these I would re-roll. So I ultimately wound up running some very spicy maps because I was so thirsty for currency mods. I also did spend a little bit of chaos rerolling the maps, but to a surprising degree, I think it actually costs less than I expected. I think I only spent about 15 chaos or so on average per map to actually reroll them and get good currency mods, and I did shoot for 100% more currency before chiseling them at all. I do think the currency chisels are worth it for very high rolls of that more currency mod. Like, I don't know that any of these particular maps would really be ones where I would want to drop a more currency chisel on them if I were going for maximum profitability, and that's because those chisels, which I have a couple of, they cost, I guess I only have one of them left, they cost 15 chaos each, so that's 60 chaos per map that you're spending on these chisels, which is probably too much for just kind of generically running even high currency roll tier 17 maps. You really want to put these only onto maps that have very, very high currency rolls. Like, I have this map here with 156% more Scarabs, and I think, yeah, 156, if that were 156 currency, and then you tap that on, you'd be pushing up into the high 200s or maybe even the 300 range on more currency. I think that would definitely justify that chisel. Whereas otherwise, I think just a regular generic cartographer's chisel for any of these ones that are like 50 of one and 70 of another, regular generic Cardos chisels are going to be better. I also think I probably lost out on a lot of value from Scarabs and unique drops just by not using the regular chisels, since I was missing 20% quantity in order to get all the extra currency drops from the fancy chisels. So with all of that being said, let me go ahead and pull up my Atlas passive tree that I use for this strategy, and this is a bit of a modified tier 17 strongbox strategy. Since it is tier 17s, we're not going to be able to get tier 17 drops, so we're not taking any of the map drop nodes. We're also not taking the cartographer's strongbox node. Like, we'll get some maps in here, and that's totally fine. I actually got a ton of maps. I got, like I said, like 400 something maps. Now, I've done some more farming since then, but before I started this, I had pretty much eaten up all of my tier 16 maps. I'd fed them to my map bozos in the town. I think I only had like 60 or 70 non-8 mod tier 16 maps left, and when I was done, I had about 500 or so, or 500 something. So I think I farmed somewhere between 400 and 500 tier 16 non-corrupted maps, which was definitely good for being able to sustain my map guys. Like I said, I farmed a lot of maps. I faved Mesa at one point. You can see I've pretty much filled up my Mesa tab. Then I faved, let's see, I faved Strand. I've pretty much filled this tab up. I faved Dunes, I think, and I filled that tab up pretty much as well. So, like, that's just 3 tabs, along with tons and tons and tons of other maps in here as well. Toxic Sewer and Underground Sea I've been feeding to my mappers, so. But those tabs were also fairly full. So I have really farmed a lot of maps in the span of doing all this. So with that being said, because we're not pushing for super duper Scarab farming, like, it's nice if you can get it on the maps for sure, but because I'm not going super duper hard on Scarabs, I'm not coming over here and taking this wheel. I'm not taking these 2 points in Scarabs. Like, I'm doing a pretty good job of getting Scarabs and Quant and Rarity and the top hat with more map mod effect, and also pack size. Since I am doing red altars, that still kind of fits better with my build as it is currently, but I'm not blocking every single type of Scarab that I wouldn't necessarily want. For one thing, since we're doing strong boxes, strong boxes are going to drop whatever Scarabs they feel like. Like, you can block Ritual or whatever, and if a strong box rolls that it'll drop Ritual Scarabs, it's going to do that regardless of whether you've blocked them. And so there are a lot of monsters that you get to kill because of strong boxes, because of how many times you get to open strong boxes, because of passives like secret compartments, and those will still not be able to drop ritual strong boxes, but to some extent, doing strong box farming, you're just going to get a bunch of random Scarabs even with blocker nodes assigned however they are. So I went just for taking shrines, making this all a little bit faster, throwing a couple of extra packs of dudes in as well. And my goal was really to try and clear these maps out in as quickly as I could. And I think I hit around the 8-minute mark or so on average. I had some go a little shorter. I had a couple that went under 6 minutes, and I was kind of surprised by how fast they had gone. I had a couple that got more like into the 10-minute range, but on average, I think my clear time was around 8 minutes, which is pretty quick. But otherwise, this is a pretty normal tier 17 Atlas or strongbox farming strategy Atlas here. The only real difference I would do between like this in a tier 16 setup is I would probably not take any of these shrine nodes for tier 16s, and I would put more of an emphasis into getting maps to drop so that I could farm more tier 17 maps. All right, now to hit up the Scarabs that I was using, this is a very simple setup. I'm actually just using one of every single type of ambush Scarab, and I can kind of go into some justification on that. So using ambush Scarab of containment makes all of the native monsters that are in a map be converted into strong boxes instead. So all of those packs will be strong boxes. So you get about 35 strong boxes from this Scarab, about 30 to 35 in a normal tier 17 map that's fairly juiced. No, you could add a bunch more strong boxes by just adding in 3 different ambush Scarabs and then just doing very little to juice them, but I really feel that you do get a lot more by adding more juice in, by adding these ambush Scarabs of potency to make these strong boxes have 75% increased explicit effects. That's the things where, you know, it says like it drops extra stuff. Basically, if you have this on there, instead of a strongbox saying it'll drop 10 extra items, it'll drop 17 or 18 extra items. So adding that onto the 35-ish strong boxes that you're going to get from containment, I think is a really good idea. It just makes them all a lot stronger. And then the same goes for the other 2 Scarabs that I'm running as well. Ambush Scarab of Discernment makes it so that you get higher quality, rarer strong boxes. We're talking primarily just Arcanist strong boxes, which drop raw currency. I did not get this in this strategy, but earlier on in the league, while doing this same basic strategy, I did get 2 Hinakora's Locks from a single strong box, and I do say that it was because of running the Discernment that I was able to get that Arcanist strong box in the first place. And then also Diviner strong boxes. I got a lot of valuable div cards throughout the process. I did get 2 doctors in the span of running this. Right here, 2 doctor cards. Right here, I got 2 brothers gifts also from Diviner's strong boxes. So I would say that the Discernment Scarab I think is completely worth it. And then there's hidden compartments, and this is maybe one that's kind of like questionable, along with the potency Scarab. Like you could just run this as a setup. If I just pull out a couple more ambush Scarabs, you could just do this, right? 3 regular ambush Scarabs, add 15 strong boxes, a containment, add about 35 strong boxes, and then Discernment, make them all be rarer. That's an option. Hidden compartments, the math on it, basically, it's 15% chance for all the strong boxes to be openable again, and that can chain, and that does stack additively. This is a different setup that I'm currently using. That does stack additively with the chance to be reopenable, the 16% that you get from the Atlas passive tree. I think roughly the math on it winds up being that you get around a break even between one of these versus one of the regular ambush Scarabs, around, I think it's like 28 to 32 strong boxes in your map. Ultimately, I think with this being a strategy that has about 35 to 40 strong boxes per map, I do think that hidden compartments is better. It's also a little cheaper. This is like 1 chaos and these are like 7. Not that that matters at all, but I do think that ultimately doing these 2 Scarabs just to kind of juice all of the strong boxes that you're getting out of containment, and then the fact that they're higher quality through Discernment, I think this is the best setup right here. This collection of all 5 different flavors of strong box. But I think you could make a case for like doing this, not bothering with potency, or even doing this, just doing containment, 3 regular ambush Scarabs, and getting 60 strong box or 50 strong boxes in every map, I guess, and then 31% chance for them to be reopenable and reopenable and reopenable. You might get to open literally hundreds of strong boxes in every single map, and you might not get as much stuff that's valuable from inside of them. You might not get as many doctor cards or brothers gifts, but you will get more chances to go more guys. So you might wind up breaking even or even pulling ahead by doing that. You know, it's kind of one of those things. It comes down to RNG, and it would really take like thousands of maps of testing to be able to compare this setup versus this setup and say definitively whether one is better than the other, but I think they're close enough for the purposes of this strategy, and I just kind of thought it made more sense to me to do everything to juice the containment setup as hard as possible. All right, now I just want to talk briefly about the last little bits of like map setup stuff. I already talked about how I was rolling up my maps. I went with fortress maps because I had like 50 or 60 of them. I just had a ton of fortress maps that I had all self-farmed, and I thought I'll run those. I like fortress. The map boss is very, very quick. It's very easy to kill him super fast, so I like that. The layout's okay. The monsters that are in there are okay. So I just went with fortress mainly because I had it, but also I had a lot of cigarette maps, and then somebody offered to buy them all for 1 divine each, and I said, yeah, all right, sure. You know, Ziggurat's boss is pretty slow, Citadel's boss is very slow, Abomination's boss is pretty hard, so Fortress and Sanctuary are the 2 that kind of stand out to me as being the 2 that have a fairly quick boss, and Fortress is a little bit quicker than Sanctuary, I think. Then the final little bit of setup here is just simply Delirium Orbs. I slapped a fine Delirium Orb onto every single one of these maps so that they would be 20% delirious. There's 2 reasons for that. One, it adds a bunch of extra guys. It adds a little bit of extra juice. It adds very little in the way of damage reduction or actual extra damage from enemies. Like the threat level from 1 Divine or Delirium Orb is fine. It's not bad. But it also makes it so that the boss will stop and cast Delirium skills fairly regularly. I think this is somewhat well known by this point, but basically it just makes the boss easier to kill, like significantly so. It really spends a lot of time being stunned by the Delirium skills, and so it actually made the map faster and easier to clear. I'm able to just tunnel on the boss more than I would be if it weren't Deliriumed up at all. It does mean that the map is going to be uglier with the Delirium effects, but it was definitely worth it, and it definitely paid off. Even if I hadn't gotten a single Chaos Orb from using the Delirium Orbs, just being able to kill the boss faster made it worth it. I also did use a, you know what, I didn't use a gold flask actually. I used an amethyst flask with rarity on it because I did find that the caustic ground from strong boxes is pretty lethal. My initial plan was to go in with a gold flask, but I ultimately didn't do that. So I didn't use any rarity other than, I guess, a flask suffix, so about 50% rarity, 56 or something percent rarity, but no item rarity support in my body armor. I wanted to clear super fast. Definitely could have added more rarity and made this more profitable, but I think it would have been a lot slower and then ultimately wound up actually being less per hour in terms of return. All right, and so here are my 2 stash tabs. This is the first one that I did the first, 20 maps, and as you can see, 116 divines from this. However, there was a little bit of an underestimate here, and I did correct that slightly. I think I've refreshed my tab a little bit since then. I think previously it was like 117. Some number has gone down slightly in here, but there were a couple of things that were just straight up underestimating. They're like, you can immediately sell Valdos puzzle boxes for like 1.3 or 1.35 divines or something, and they were being listed at 1.2. Some other things, Devouring Fragments also being underlisted, then some other stuff like these Brothers Gifts being listed at 5.3 divines, which sometimes divination cards will be valued higher than what they're actually worth. Like if there's something that you can gamble, just usually mirror cards, things that you can gamble, they can be worth like more than they actually trade in for. But Brothers Gifts they're 1 card, so there's no potential to gamble these at all. So I don't know why it was valuing them at 0.3 divines higher. So ultimately I kind of went through and I added up some things that I thought were a little undervalued and a little overvalued, and I came out with thinking that I was undervalued by Wealthy Exile to the tune of about 3 divines, so I kind of added that in here. And then also there was an Enlighten that dropped. I had 2 different Enlightens drop in the span of running all these maps. One of them was corrupted and one of them was not, and I quality'd the uncorrupted one up and leveled it up to level 2, and then that caused it for whatever reason to just not be registered in the tab anymore. I don't know why. It was registered at level 1. It would definitely be registered at level 3, but it just wasn't being found. So that also is another 3 divines that I added in. So between those 2, I hit right at 150 divines over the span of these 25 maps. And then I ran out of space in my first tab after 20 maps, so I made the out of space tab just to kind of, document the remaining stuff that I got in the final 5 maps. And that's this tab, and it's 2 Doctors, it's 2 Yokes of Suffering, which are pretty well rolled, again, a little bit undervalued, and then just so many Scarabs. So many Void cards as well in all of this. Like if I just right-click a Void here, yeah, see, not even close to all of the Voids that were in there. So a lot of stuff to sort through once this video is done. It'll be fun. I hope I get something good out of even one of the Voids. That would be cool. I doubt it, but it would be pretty cool. So with that being said, I think all of this stuff is pretty easy to liquidate. Yes, this was another one that was very, very undervalued. It's these Ambush Scarabs of Containment. If I look at my price on the Ambush Scarabs of Containment, I paid 1.5 divines for them. I don't know why they're being underestimated to the tune of about 40, 50 chaos in Wealthy Exile, but it is what it is. So this is the kind of price that I was paying for all of these maps. You know, I counted these maps, which were self-farmed, but still I could sell them all pretty easily for 110 or 115 chaos. I counted myself as spending about 10 to 15 chaos rolling each of them. And then 7 chaos on the ambush scarab, 240 chaos, 1.5 divines on the containment, 16 chaos on the discernment. Hidden compartments is like 1.5 chaos, and potency's 1 chaos. 4 chaos on the ambush map device, 15 chaos on each of the chisels of avarice is 60 chaos per map, insane. And then 14 chaos on a single fine delirium orb on each map. Put us right at, yeah, a little over 3 divines per map in terms of cost, but then we wound up making over that in terms of profit per map. And with an average time of about 8 minutes, you know, it took me somewhere between 3 hours and 15 minutes and 3.5 hours to do all of this. So right at like 3 hours, 20 minutes or so puts us at about 8 minutes per map. That is 23 divines per hour. Now, if we added in the like 8 to 10 divines that I got worth of maps, tier 16 regular rando maps, that puts us more in the like 25 divines per hour range, which is what I was saying. Now, if you're a little slower, if it's like 10 minutes a map, this is still pretty good currency generation. It's not like mind-blowing, but if you're a little slower, it's still pretty good. If you're wildly slower, you know, if it's taking you like 15 minutes a map, I think you're better off sticking in tier 16. This is definitely like a high roller strategy. Even if you're able to safely clear, I just simply wouldn't do it if I was on a build that's going to be kind of, you know, struggle blessing through. Also, the gold per hour, kind of not a surprise with the currency per hour being so high, the divines per hour being so high, but the gold per hour was over 700,000 gold an hour. I really made a lot of gold doing this strategy as well, so I was very happy with this overall, and again, super fun. Alright, so there it is. I'm pretty sure this is the most expensive farm strategy that I've ever run. I really enjoyed it. You know, over 3 divines per map is pretty high. Definitely not the highest you could absolutely go, but pretty high while still making sense. Ambush is a really fun league mechanic. It's one of the oldest in Path of Exile, but also one of the community's favorites. They just absolutely nailed the design all the way back in 2014 or whenever they made it. It's great stuff. My goal here was to set money on fire with the hope that I could make some currency doing it and maybe even learn something at the same time, and I think I managed to do both, but I also think this could be even further optimized. I think the biggest change I would make to this setup is to be a lot more selective when it comes to using the expensive Maven's chisels, and probably to shift more of your Atlas passive tree into maximizing your Scarab drops, since they can be such humongous jackpots. Like, I could show that off very briefly. I think something I could definitely justify doing is dropping all of the shrine nodes, dropping all of the map nodes that I have in a tier 16 setup, and then just taking some of these small passives here, Scarab drop chance, coming over and taking these Scarab drop chance, and then just basically filling in as many leftover points as I could and getting more Scarab drop chance. I kind of played around with this a bit in PoE Planner, and I found that I was able to take this number, 82% increased Scarabs, and push that all the way up into the like 115 range or something, which is pretty good. Like, that's quite a lot more Scarabs than I would have gotten in the farm strategy that I just did, and I definitely think that would pay off for you. You know, you'd have to make some sacrifices elsewhere, probably just in terms of like dropping domination points, but yeah, there it is. Like, we just went from 80 something to 120 something increased Scarabs with just really that little bit of a drop. Not too bad. Definitely going to pay off, since Scarabs can be such tremendous jackpots when good ones drop. And there are a lot of good ones. There are, I think, 5 different Scarabs that are a divine or more. And then in terms of Scarabs that are like 20 chaos or more, there's like 8 or 10 more of those as well. I think there's a potential for a bigger payoff than what I got, while also being a strategy that's a bit cheaper. With all that being said, I do recommend this farm strategy. Maybe you want to go for the cheaper version. I think that's a smart idea, but other than that, Ambush rocks. I recommend it. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.